The 2024 Mazda CX-50. The CX-50 is a vehicle Mark and I have covered twice since its launch. However, in late 23 and specifically for the 24 model year, this car received a couple mid-cycle running engineering changes focusing on addressing some of the deficiencies of this vehicle. Those deficiencies were purely built around some of the comfort issues customers were having. Mazda, in typical Mazda fashion, prioritized driving dynamics in this vehicle. And in the past, the steering was too heavy, the suspension was not necessarily the most comfortable, and there were some other tidbits that people found bothersome. But to Mazda's benefit, this is a class of car, things like the RAV4, CR-V, Tiguan's of the world, Equinoxes, that are largely soulless appliances, and Mazda tried to make this feel a little bit alive while you were driving it. And we're going to talk about what they changed in the shop segment a little bit later. So briefly, from a pricing perspective, it's right in line with everything else. The base model CX-50 starts just north of $30,000. This fully loaded turbocharged model with all the options is in the mid-40s. Now, from an interior perspective, this is traditional Mazda. You have a rotary dial for the infotainment. It does have touch capacity when you are stopped. It has wireless Apple CarPlay, Android Automotive. I will say neither of them work that well, at least from a wireless perspective. You'll run into some issues. It puts its sound through a Bose audio system. It's fairly good. It's definitely better than the JBLs found in something like a RAV4. And it's probably in line with the Bose found in a fully loaded CR-V. Good visibility, lots of large door pockets. I mean, it is exactly what you're looking for in a two-row SUV like this. Adult can fit in the second row, even with a taller driver. And if you fold the rear seats down, you're looking at just over 50 cubic feet of cargo capacity. The rear seats up, you're looking at about 31. Now, I will say, versus something like a RAV4, this is a smaller vehicle. The RAV4 definitely has a wider trunk. It is probably more usable from that perspective, but even in the base CX-50, Mazda does a really good job. And these seats, while they are on the shorter side when it comes to leg bolstering, on longer drives, they're reasonably comfortable, and in this top trim, they are heated and cooled. So with that, let's head into the shop and put this thing up on the lift. In the shop with the 2024 Mazda CX-50, this vehicle just received a minor refresh, along with some of the later built 2023 variants. So we're going to do our best to discuss the technical attributes of these changes and, of course, how this vehicle stacks up in our ever-changing market of mid-size, non-premium, two-row SUVs. And let me tell you, this is a very, very busy class of cars. The CX-50 is primarily an American market-specific SUV. It is built on Mazda's Skyactiv front-wheel drive architecture, which means it's highly scalable. It has a strut front and a torsion beam rear suspension. The CX-50 only comes as all-wheel drive, and you get two different powertrain variants. You get a naturally aspirated 2.5-liter four-cylinder engine, which makes 186 horsepower and 187 foot-pounds of torque, or this variant's 2.5-liter turbocharged engine, which, depending on the fuel you put in, it either makes 227 horsepower on 87 or 256 on 93. And if you also are keeping track, the torque figure also changes. On lower octane fuel, it makes 310. On higher octane, it makes 320. The fuel economy penalty between these two drivetrains is 1 mile per gallon. The NA engine gets slightly better fuel economy, though in the real world, on the highway at 80 miles an hour, this turbocharged four-cylinder will eke out about 28 miles per gallon, which is pretty good if I'm going to be entirely honest, and that's on 87. Now, when it comes to suspension, why does this thing have a torsion beam? Well, we've talked about this before. Mazda's claim is that they rather have spent the money and developed a very good torsion beam versus spent the same amount of money and not gotten a optimally designed multi-link. They also claim it's better for packaging as well. In the real world, most of its competitors, essentially all of them, use a multi-link. And I will say, under smaller bumps, busy roads, a lot of washboarding, you do feel the torsion beam rear end. It is a busier feeling rear than, say, a RAV4 or a Honda CR-V. And we will be doing a future comparison test. We compare these to our two favorite rivals. We'll put them all on the same tire and walk through NVH and all that other fun stuff. The suspension itself, like basically every vehicle in this class, is non-active. It is a passive damper. However, that is one of the changes they made for the 2024s and late 23s. They've changed the damper style. They've gone to a more linear damper, which means smaller bumps, you get less damping, which means it's less pronounced in the cabin, and over bigger bumps, say you're going light off-roading or you hit a really broken pothole in the middle of the road, You get more damping, which means less NVH, better ride quality. Steering, which was a complaint that Mark had on the early 23s, has also been recalibrated. It's supposed to have more feel and be lighter. And the brake booster was recalibrated as well, which means it has a little bit more initial bite. And Mazda traditionally has a very heavy feeling brake pedal, which again, very linear. Mazda tries to make all of their vehicles feel a bit like a sports sedan. All the inputs are 1-to-1, all very linear. A lot of their Mazda-ness still makes its way into this vehicle. Past that though, I think it's time for Mark and I to go take this for a quick drive. You know what time it is, Mark?
I can't afford to fall off the horse again, Jack.
Jinbai Tai. I really feel that relationship I've developed with this thing over the 2,000 miles I've put on it. I really do feel like the horse and me as the rider are truly one, Mark. And is that why you're wearing a helmet?
No, I just feel more comfortable. I feel safer. So tell me about your experience with this vehicle. I know you've only had 2,000 miles on it. Why did you get it? Why are you using it? What's the takeaways from when we drove it originally?
So as I mentioned in the beginning of this video, you and I both had some mixed feelings in the 23. Mm-hmm. And since then, some reviews have come out on the 24 versus its ever-changing and growing competitive set. Things like the new CR-V, which is a hybrid, the RAV4, which is sort of an appliance but it'll go forever, the Tiguan's of the world, and a lot of other outlets like Car and Driver love this thing. It's like their favorite small, mid-sized SUV thing. And that's why I wanted to get into this thing. Our last vehicle we drove was a Mazda 3 long-termer, and I feel like the CX-50 is sort of the natural progression for a lot of people. You buy that car when you're younger, you don't have a family. This is more of a small family car, and I wanted to see what this thing is like to live with, and if I liked this thing. And sort of for the purposes of this video as a review, I think they have addressed the biggest complaint you had with it, which was it's, well, feelful, but hilariously heavy steering.
Yeah, I remember driving the press car we had, and I'm like, wow, this has got some amazing steering for an SUV. And then after like 2 days, I was over it. It didn't need to be as heavy as it was. I mean, while it was almost a complete like 1% rarity in this market, it just, for the type of people that are driving it, it was too much effort. And I found that especially more painful when you're actually using it as a regular car. And obviously they do a lot of good things with steering. It's not jerky. It's not like you're constantly having to correct, but it was just the weight, and they fixed that, right?
Yep. And the brake pedal, Mazdas always have, compared to most sort of MPC CUVs, have very heavy inputs for braking, and it's so you can be more linear with it and have more feel. Now there's some more initial bite, and the suspension tuning of this car, it's why I picked this specific road. They're doing their best with a non-independent rear suspension. They still have the twist beam in the back. You rode in this thing for several hours yesterday in the back of this vehicle.
I did, and I was not feeling good. I've been sick the past couple days because Jack put me in more VA cars. So I'm having a surge of testosterone that my body's not used to. So when he put me in the back seat,
your PSA levels were high.
Yeah. My prostate specific antigen was off the charts. But I was surprised that really the back seat space, I was expecting it to be more jouncy and bouncy because of the torsion beam, but it was pretty well isolated. You almost didn't know that it wasn't independent. And the noise levels weren't as bad as I was expecting either. So they've done a good job. We had the shade closed for the panoramic as well. It was a very livable place.
Yeah, no, I've been mostly impressed with this car. I do think the ride though, it's not terrible. And obviously in the back seat over better pavement, it's not too bad, but if over like really broken pavement, it does not do as well as something like a CR-V, which has an independent rear end, a Tiguan, which has an independent rear end, or even a RAV4. This is one of the things that does hurt this car still, is the suspension architecture. Yeah. But when you're turning and you're driving and you're over bigger bumps, the thing's great. I mean, I've spent a lot of time in this vehicle, and a family member of mine has a RAV4. I've driven that thing a lot, and just behind the wheel, this is a much better feeling car more of the time. And I know we have the turbo, the expensive model, which comes in at $44, but at least the dynamic part of this, other than the engine power, is the same in the one you buy for like $30,000 and some change.
I think the good thing at this price point that it does is it still feels like it's not a generic box on wheels, right? Yeah. There's some soul to it, outside, inside. The usability is good. It's classic Mazda stuff, classic Japanese design. I do feel like this is a very more refined interior in terms of NVH, especially with a helmet on. I don't hear anything. So I mean, there's
That's
that.
why you should drive with a helmet always?
Yeah, that's really what this is about. I'm trying to sell my new helmets. And onto our next integration, Jack. Check out my new underwear that I've created. Oh, don't do that. That's too fast.
All right.
So what do you think overall? Honestly, like
I think the only thing that really hurts this if you're shopping it, and we will be doing a comparison test, a comprehensive one where we bring out the three that we like along with this, and fuel economy test, and NVH test, subjective handling and space. The only thing that will hurt certain people for this vehicle is the fact that it doesn't come with a hybrid setup. And in a car like this, while I do like the fact that this has over 300 foot-pounds of torque, I almost rather get 40 miles per gallon.
Yeah, that's a hard one. I mean, I like the fact that you have the power and the torque here, you know, and it's
and no CVT.
No CVT. It's a traditional.
Is that
transmission.
where you live?
Yeah,
the
gate with like my own private drive and everything. No, not yet. I'm looking at
more integrations.
Yeah, more integrations will get me there to my trailer home with my own gravel driveway leading to it. But the point is like there's less complication here. It's for somebody that doesn't want a hybrid. I think it's the brand you go to has a little bit more driving engagement. You just have to take care of it. Make sure you do your oil changes. Take it to the dealership religiously. Even make sure that the engine's healthy. There shouldn't be giving you a lot of headaches, and it looks the part. I mean, I think this is one of the better looking Mazda like SUVs. Even more so, it's a little bit more butch than the CX-5. So I kind of like that about it. I have almost very little to complain about it when you put in perspective.
They're trying
where
to
the
take
price
the
is.
NPC out of the NPC mobile.
Yeah, it is definitely.
So with that, Mark, I'll head into the final thoughts and discuss some of the reliability concerns and any of the other pros and cons that this vehicle has.
Take me home.
Final thoughts on the Mazda CX-50. Now, what does this thing do well? Well, if you've driven Mazdas in the past, you know they prioritize driving dynamics, and that's what they've done for this vehicle. They've addressed some of the deficiencies of the past. While it still doesn't ride as well as the CR-V, Tiguan, or even the RAV4, to be honest, it does drive better. It handles better. The front end feels really good. The steering is excellent, particularly now that they've made it a little bit lighter, but it still retains the feel of the past. The brake pedal is very linear. It feels like you are not driving this soulless appliance down the road, which is great. Its cons are, well, it's not as big as something like a RAV4, and compared to something like a CR-V or a RAV4 hybrid, it will never eke out the fuel economy. And if you are looking for ultimate running cost, this might not be the vehicle for you. And historically, there have been some problems with the 2.5-liter turbocharged engine. Reading on the forums as of now, I haven't seen that yet for the CX-50, at least not in large numbers, but the jury's out. That's actually one of the reasons why we picked this as a long-term car. We're gonna be driving this for the next year, putting as many miles on it as possible, just like we did in the Mazda 3. We're gonna be giving you a series of updates and putting it in some comparison tests with its nearest and dearest rivals. So with that, thanks for watching. We hope to see you soon.